The office was already buzzing with the energy of the early morning rush, but no one noticed Martha as she quietly entered through the side door, rolling her cleaning cart with her usual steady pace. She wore her dark green uniform like armor, her face calm and unassuming, betraying none of the emotions she kept carefully tucked away. To the executives, she was invisible, just the cleaning lady. The person who wiped their desks, emptied their trash cans, and occasionally exchanged polite nods with the few who acknowledged her existence. It had been like this for years at Hawthorne Beck, a thriving corporation in the heart of Dallas, Texas. Martha, now in her mid-50s, had grown used to the routine and the dismissive looks. She overheard the jokes they made when they thought she wasn't listening, the way her presence was treated as an inconvenience. "She's not even doing anything right now," someone had muttered just last week, as she quietly waited for them to finish their meeting so she could clean the conference room. But Martha didn't react. She never did. She kept her head down, her hands steady as she worked. She knew better than to give them the satisfaction of a reaction. What they didn't know, what no one in that office knew, was that Martha had a secret so powerful it could turn the entire building on its head. But Martha wasn't impulsive. She believed in patience, in watching and waiting. Today, however, as she made her way down the brightly lit hallways, her calm demeanor hid the fact that she was nearing her breaking point. The morning unfolded as usual. Martha polished the glass doors to perfection, vacuumed the thick carpet in the lobby, and organized the cluttered desks of those who never thought twice about leaving piles of paperwork behind. She worked diligently, even as conversations about big deals and promotions floated through the air. One conversation, though, caught her attention. She wasn't trying to eavesdrop. It wasn't her nature. But the voices were loud and impossible to ignore. "The shareholders' meeting is next week," one executive said, his tone smug, bordering on arrogant. "And we've got nothing to worry about. The board loves the numbers, and the CEO is untouchable. No one in their right mind would challenge him." Martha paused for just a moment, gripping the handle of her cart tighter. She knew what they didn't. They had no idea how wrong they were. But Martha didn't let her thoughts linger for long. There was still work to do, and she had to be ready for what was coming. Hawthorne Beck prided itself on its sleek modern image. Its headquarters, a towering glass building in the middle of Dallas, was often featured in business magazines as a symbol of corporate success. Inside, however, the reality was far less glamorous. The culture was ruthless, and the higher you climbed, the less you seemed to care about anyone below you. Martha had spent nearly a decade in those hallways, quietly observing. She saw the promotions handed out to the loudest voices, not the most qualified workers. She saw the whispered deals behind closed doors, the way people covered up mistakes by pinning blame on those with no power to defend themselves. And then there was the CEO, Alan Greaves, a man who exuded authority and arrogance in equal measure. Alan was the kind of leader who commanded respect through fear. His voice boomed in meetings, his sharp comments silencing even the boldest executives. To him, success was all that mattered, and people were tools to be used. Martha often heard his sarcastic remarks about employees who didn't fit the image. "She's still here?" Martha had once overheard Alan say about one of the older secretaries. "Why haven't we retired her yet? It's not like she's adding value." It wasn't just the comments. The company was rife with unethical practices that were swept under the rug. Bonuses were quietly cut for the lower-level staff, even as the leadership team celebrated record-breaking profits. Martha heard about inflated expense reports, shady client dealings, and even the quiet firing of a whistleblower who dared to speak up. The cleaning staff, Martha included, bore the brunt of the culture. She'd seen her co-workers brought to tears after being scolded for leaving a speck of dust behind. She'd seen their paychecks stagnate even as the workload increased. And of course, there was the constant dismissal of their humanity. The way people avoided eye contact, spoke down to them, or treated them as if they were part of the furniture. One incident still burned in Martha's memory. A young intern had accidentally spilled coffee on the marble floor near Alan's office. The intern froze, clearly terrified, as Alan rounded the corner. "Are you kidding me?" Alan snapped. His eyes darted to Martha, who had just walked by with her mop and bucket. "Clean this up!" he barked at her as if she were at fault. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. The intern apologized profusely, but Alan waved him off with a dismissive. People like Martha and the intern were nothing more than background noise to him. These moments had piled up over the years, each one like a stone added to a growing mountain. Martha's patience was impressive, but she wasn't immune to the weight of it all. She felt the sting of disrespect, the exhaustion of being invisible. But Martha had never been the type to crumble. She let those moments fuel her resolve, storing them away like ammunition for the day she would need them. The employees around her might not have noticed her silence, but it spoke volumes. Martha was always watching, always listening, and the more she saw, the more she realized that the company's success came at the expense of its humanity. But Martha wasn't just taking notes, she was quietly planning, and soon the pieces would start to fall into place. For years, Martha had kept her secret tightly guarded, not out of fear, but out of strategy. She wasn't just a cleaning lady. She was the largest shareholder in Hawthorne Beck, a title she had inherited after the unexpected passing of her late husband, Martin. Martin had been a quiet investor in the company's early days, accumulating shares when no one believed in its potential. By the time of his death, those shares had become a controlling stake. At first, Martha didn't know what to do with this unexpected power. She wasn't a corporate strategist or a boardroom regular. She was just Martha. A woman who had raised 2 kids, fought her way through life's challenges, and found solace in routine. But over time, as she continued her quiet work within the company, she realized the value of her position. Being invisible gave her an advantage. She could observe without being noticed, listen without raising suspicion, and learn everything she needed to know about the people who thought they ran the company. The moment that pushed her over the edge came during a routine evening shift. Martha had just finished wiping down the executive lounge when she overheard 2 senior managers laughing over drinks. They were talking about layoffs, joking about how easy it was to cut dead weight without anyone caring. "Some of these people act like their jobs matter," one of them said with a laugh. "They don't realize how replaceable they are." Martha stood frozen behind the door, her hand gripping the cleaning cloth. These weren't just numbers on a spreadsheet. These were real people. People with families, bills, and dreams. And yet to these men, they were nothing more than expendable assets. That night, Martha sat at her small kitchen table with a cup of tea and a notepad. She started writing, not sure where it would lead, but knowing she couldn't stay silent anymore. She listed the unethical practices she had witnessed, the people who had been mistreated, and the moments that had stuck with her over the years. By the time the sun rose, she had outlined a plan that would change everything. Her first step was to dig deeper. Martha used her access to the building to gather information most people wouldn't think twice about. She took mental notes on conversations, paid attention to schedules, and even discreetly glanced at documents left on desks. She wasn't stealing or snooping. She was simply putting the pieces together, assembling a picture of the company's inner workings. The second step was to call in reinforcements. Martha had a few trusted allies outside the company, friends who were lawyers, financial analysts, and former employees who had left on bad terms. She shared what she knew and asked for their advice. Slowly, they helped her craft a strategy that would not only expose the toxic culture, but also secure the company's future. The final step was the hardest. Martha knew that confronting the CEO and the board would require more than just evidence. It would require courage, composure, and a deep belief in her own worth. She practiced her speech in front of the mirror, her voice steady but firm. She knew this wasn't just about her. It was about everyone who had ever been dismissed, underestimated, or treated as less than. The shareholders' meeting was less than a week away, and Martha was ready. She wasn't just walking into that room as a cleaning lady. She was walking in as someone who held the future of the company in her hands. But as the day approached, Martha couldn't help but feel the weight of what she was about to do. It wasn't just a confrontation. It was a reckoning. The day of the shareholders' meeting arrived with an air of confidence radiating through the building. Executives strutted through the hallways, their chatter filled with optimism about another year of record profits. None of them noticed Martha pushing her cleaning cart toward the top-floor conference room, her face calm and unreadable as always. The boardroom was a stark contrast to the rest of the office. Its long, polished table gleamed under soft lighting, and the floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of the Dallas skyline. Around the table sat the company's most powerful figures, including Alan Greaves at the head, his posture commanding. Martha entered quietly, as she always did, placing a pitcher of water on the side table. No one looked at her. To them, she was just part of the backdrop. But this time, Martha didn't leave. "Excuse me," she said, her voice cutting through the room like a blade. Heads turned, confused and slightly annoyed. Alan barely glanced at her. "We're in the middle of something," he said dismissively. "I know," Martha replied, her tone steady but firm. "That's why I'm here." Alan's expression shifted from condescension to confusion as Martha spread the contents of the folder in front of him. Inside were documents, emails, financial reports, internal memos, and even photos, each piece a piece of the puzzle that had been carefully assembled over the years. The evidence was damning, she continued, her voice growing stronger. "These are the hidden deals you've made to line your pockets while cutting bonuses for the people who clean your offices, file your papers, and answer your phones. This is the illegal activity you've brushed under the rug, thinking no one would notice." The board members exchanged uneasy glances. Alan's mouth was dry as he tried to regain control of the room, but his usual bravado had begun to wane. "You think you can disrupt this company over some allegations?" he sneered, but there was less confidence in his voice now. Martha ignored him, flipping to a particularly damning email where Alan had mocked an employee's medical leave. "You think you can joke about firing people with families to support, the very people who helped build this company?" She glanced at each board member, locking eyes with them. "You've all been complicit." There was silence in the room, the air thick with tension. Alan's usual confidence had faltered, and his gaze darted around the room, but no one spoke up in his defense. Martha didn't wait for him to respond. She pressed on. "I've watched you all treat people like they don't matter, but let me remind you of something. You might own this company, but I hold the majority of the shares. And today, you'll listen to me, because it's time to change." With that, she pulled out a resignation letter from Alan, printed on the company letterhead, signed and dated. "This is what I'm offering. Either Alan Greaves steps down as CEO and the board agrees to a full ethical overhaul, or I sell my shares, and this company will face the scrutiny it deserves." The silence was deafening. Alan's voice boomed across the room. "Who do you think you are, coming in here and making accusations? You're a cleaning lady." Martha met his glare with a calmness that shook the room. "No, Mr. Greaves. I'm the majority shareholder of Hawthorne Beck, and today I'm firing you." The shock rippled through the room like a thunderclap. Alan's face turned pale, his confident demeanour crumbling as the words sank in. "You're joking," he said, his voice trembling slightly. Martha didn't blink. "No, Mr. Greaves, I'm not." She turned to the board members, her gaze sharp. "I've spent years gathering evidence, and it's all here. The inflated expense reports, the unethical layoffs, the harassment complaints you've buried. I have the power to vote him out, and I'm using it." The room erupted in chaos. Alan tried to argue, his voice rising in desperation, but the board members quickly realized the gravity of the situation. One by one, they turned to Martha, asking questions, skimming through the folder and confirming her claims. It didn't take long for the vote to happen. Martha had done her homework, and the evidence she presented left no room for doubt. Alan Greaves was removed from his position that same afternoon, his protests falling on deaf ears as security escorted him out of the building. Martha stood in the boardroom, her back straight and her expression calm. The executives who had once ignored her now looked at her with a mixture of awe and guilt. But Martha wasn't looking for their approval. She had already set her sights on what came next. The news of Alan Greaves' dismissal spread through the company like wildfire. By the next morning, the entire office was abuzz with disbelief and speculation. How could the cleaning lady, quiet, unassuming Martha, have been the majority shareholder all along? Whispers filled the break rooms and hallways, but this time they weren't dismissive. They were filled with respect, admiration, and even a tinge of guilt. Martha, however, didn't bask in the attention. She returned to the office the next day, not with a mop and bucket, but with a clipboard and a plan. She wasn't just here to fire a toxic CEO, she was here to change the company's future. In the weeks that followed, Martha worked tirelessly to implement changes. She started with the people who had been overlooked for years. Raises were given to the cleaning staff and other underappreciated workers. Martha made sure that the HR department took harassment and discrimination complaints seriously, introducing a third-party watchdog to ensure transparency. She also addressed the toxic culture that had festered under Alan's leadership. The board, once complicit in his actions, now found themselves held accountable. Martha insisted on regular training programs focused on ethics, inclusion, and employee well-being. For the first time in years, employees at Hawthorne Beck felt seen, heard, and valued. But Martha didn't stop there. She hosted town hall meetings, inviting employees from every level to share their experiences and ideas. She listened carefully, taking notes, and ensuring that everyone had a voice in shaping the company's future. One afternoon, as Martha was walking through the office, she was stopped by a young intern, the same one who had spilled coffee near Alan's office all those months ago. "Thank you," he said, his voice sincere, "for everything you've changed about this place." Martha smiled warmly. "No, we've changed this place together." Outside the building, the Dallas skyline glittered in the late afternoon sun. Martha stood for a moment, looking up at the towering glass structure she had once entered unnoticed. It had been a long road, but she had done what many thought was impossible. This wasn't just about firing a CEO or exposing corruption. It was about showing that no matter how invisible someone might feel, they can hold the power to create meaningful change. Martha had proven that resilience, patience, and integrity could triumph over arrogance and greed. She took a deep breath, feeling a sense of peace she hadn't felt in years. And then she walked away, not to fade into the background, but to embrace a new chapter in her life. Life often underestimates the quiet strength of those who observe, endure, and act when the time is right. Martha's story reminds us that the most unexpected people can become the catalysts for profound change. If you found her journey inspiring, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that prove the power of resilience and justice.